I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Becki Ross, who's currently occupying place 6 on the City Council and is running for re-election. I invite you to join us in that conversation here on Lean and Leander. So we're back here at Lantern Media Studios, and for the second time in the Vote In Leander Series, which this is a whole new setup with a whole list of new things to play with and figure out. But what hasn't changed is what we're doing here at Vote In Leander, which is talking to the candidates, and I'm very happy to have as my guest today, Becki.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Becki Ross, right?
Yeah,
I was like, what? I forgot her last name for a second. No, sorry. Long day. Anyway, okay, so yeah, and you are in place 6, right? Yes, okay. Yep. I remember that from when you were running. So what we're going to do, just like we typically do here at Lean and Leander and for the Vote In Leander series, we're going to talk to Becki in a way that hopefully you as a listener or a viewer will be able to find out a little bit more about her. And we won't steer away from the politics per se, but we're not necessarily going to dive into that. We really want to kind of give people an opportunity to see the person behind the candidate. So again, I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
Much. So last time we met, we were at Waco Taco.
Yeah, that's correct.
And
3 years ago.
3 years ago, and you were running for place 6 at that point. So to familiarize people with, where you come from, who you are, and whatnot, you were born and raised in Louisiana, right?
Correct.
Okay, and then you made it over here to Texas as soon as you could, right?
Of course. In 2003 is when my family and I relocated.
Okay, and then how long have you been in Leander? Just to...
We've been in Leander since 2012, but we moved to the Cedar Park area in 2003.
Okay, and as I've spoken with a couple of people, actually a couple of candidates who that seems to be kind of, if you were already out here in Central Texas, say before 2000, a lot of people were up here in Cedar Park, and then Leander starts developing and you move to
correct.
Leander.
When we moved here in 2003, I want to say there was 13,000 people in Leander maybe. So there really wasn't much, and even in Cedar Park, we drove into Austin for everything. There was nothing in Cedar Park.
So it's changed quite a bit in the last 23 years. I think it's an easy thing for people to understand,
change,
right?
Yes.
So I always like to reflect on that just from the perspective of you were here a little bit longer than I've been here, but I've been here now going on 6 years, and in 6 years, it's changed dramatically. Like it has, I'm constantly reminded of how much changes not only has occurred but is continuing to occur.
It is, and a lot of times Leander gets compared to Cedar Park, and why aren't we doing what Cedar Park is doing? But cities grow from the inside out, and so that's the progression. And now Cedar Park is actually, they're just about grown out, and also they're entering their redevelopment phase. Right, and we're still developing. So Cedar Park is going to be 10 to 15 years ahead of us on things. But so we're right where we need to be and plugging forward.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point to call out, because a lot of times for people who are maybe a little less aware, and frankly probably new to the area, generally speaking.
Sure.
There's that question. It comes up like, why aren't we doing what they're doing in Cedar Park, and why aren't we doing what they're doing in Georgetown, for example? Those are conversations that we hear when you're tuned into this conversation.
Sure.
But I think it is important to point that out. That just look at it from Austin. If you zoom into Austin for a minute, and you look at where Austin was 23 years ago or whatnot.
I believe there was like 800,000 in the metro area
there wasn't,
back then.
Right. I remember driving, we talked about this in one of the other episodes. I remember driving to Austin when I was in college. And I more than likely drove through, or by rather, at that point, Cedar Park, Leander, Georgetown, etc. Like they weren't really there. They were cow pastures. Right. So all of this has been exponential from that perspective. And, finding yourself in a situation where you're living in Leander in the early 20-aughts, right? Turn of the century.
Right.
some of the things that you were doing at that point, I'd like to kind of bring that up and just help people understand how you kind of ended up in this political space. You did a lot of volunteer work, right?
Mm-hmm.
In addition to what you were doing in your career. So,
Right.
shorthand on this, you were, if I remember correctly, kind of doing some human resource stuff, and then you kind of changed
Right.
direction and went into insurance, right?
Yeah,
That's a
well,
shorthand.
I've been yeah, more or less the same. Yeah, I decided to open. I'd worked in the insurance on the corporate side for years and years, and really wanted to be out on my own. So, in 2009, I bit the bullet and quit my day job and opened an insurance agency. I was in South Austin for a lot of years, and just the commute was killing me. So, and had always been my dream to be able to see my customers, be involved, whether it was the school or whatever it was, to be just a part of the community fabric. That was very important to me. And so when I was able to relocate my business up to this area back in the end of 2017, it allowed me the ability, because I wasn't sitting on I-35 anymore.
Right. It was
Right?
near Buda, right?
Yeah, it really was. It was one exit short.
I remember you saying that last
And
time.
so I was able to really take my life back and do the things I wanted to do. My daughters were younger at the time, and so I spent a lot of time volunteering with the school district, whether it was booster clubs, team sports, club sports, you name the sport, we were probably there. And then as the kids got older, and I got involved in the Leander Chamber of Commerce, I just saw so much opportunity to be involved in things that I thought would use my talents better. And so this is where I ended up.
So there was a period of time where, with the chamber, you were actually director or president of the chamber, something like that, right?
In 2020. So I went through, when I moved my business up here, I immediately joined the Leander Chamber of Commerce and got involved, threw my name in the hat, and was accepted into the Leadership Leander program. So I graduated from that in 2017. From there are opportunities for the Chamber of Commerce Board. So when those nominations rolled around, I threw my name in the hat for consideration and was interviewed and accepted for that. And then in 2020, I ended up serving as the Chamber Board President.
So the chamber is where you and I actually met each other for the first time.
We
Because there
did.
was an economic development committee.
Yep, that's it.
That's funny. Yeah, so that's where you and I first became acquainted, and then subsequent to that, you started kind of throwing your hat in the ring again, to use your terminology.
Yes.
In the political arena, kind of taking the next step, if you will.
Correct.
And you ran. I think you ran for council one time prior to 3 years ago.
Correct.
You didn't win that election.
Correct.
And then you were. I don't want to say you were reticent this last time, but I don't think that you were necessarily planning on it, right? It was kind of something that came up.
It was something that it was rolling around in my head, but I wasn't quite sure, because the election process it's hard.
Right.
And it's not for the faint of heart, and I just couldn't decide if that's what I wanted to do again. And but I wanted to serve. I wanted to be on council because I thought I could really make a difference. But I wasn't sure if I really wanted to wade through
the process.
The process again.
Right, right. So, which I always like to point out, perfect segue. The council seats, the mayor, those are all not technically, they are volunteer positions.
Yes.
Unlike other cities and neighboring cities may differ, there's no one getting paid to be the mayor or paid to be on council. It's, in essence, it is another committee. It's just a committee with a little bit of pull. Like you're deciding budget issues and you're deciding ordinance issues.
Correct.
And the business direction of the city overall. That's a fair assessment, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yep.
So again, for those of you who might have just found the podcast, you're stumbling across stuff and you run into this, that's an important note for you as a voter to understand that the people who are putting themselves forward for these positions are doing so because they care about the community and they want to be involved. This is a level of engagement that they wish to accept because, like to your point, the politics of it, the running for the position in the first place is stressful.
Well, it's stressful and it's expensive.
Right,
You know,
right.
the first go around when I lost, all those campaign dollars came out of my pocket.
Right.
And it's like, how much money do you want to spend, you
Right,
know,
to
to
be
do
on a
this
committee,
thing,
right?
So the second go around, I did a little bit differently, and I was able to offset my cost, you know, barely, but I did it. And so, you know, it's just a different mindset. So going into this go around, I'm like, you know what, I want to continue the good work. And if, you know, and the chips will fall where they fall,
Right.
where, you know, on the money part. So that'll figure itself out. But I just feel so strongly that we've done such good things over the last few years that it's important to continue.
Yep. No, and again, that's part and parcel of what we try to do here with the podcast is to kind of give people an opportunity to get a different perspective on some of that stuff. I use the turn of phrase that when election season rolls around, you start seeing the bloom of the political signs across the roads, and so I would say, and you know, I can point to previous podcasts where I've actually done some work on this. Anywhere around 5.5% of the registered voters will actually turn out in any one election.
Mm-hmm.
So it's thousands of people, and there's almost 100,000 people living in Leander now, right?
Correct.
So even if you take that, just like, you know, we're 80-something thousand, 89,000 right now, or something to that effect, and then about 50% of that are registered to vote. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so now you're looking at around 47,000 people, and of that, about 5,000, 7,000 will vote. So it's a small minority of the populace that is taking the time to get involved and at least exercise that, and which, again, I applaud everybody who does that. I just want to encourage more people to do that. Like, get yourself registered, get yourself to the voting
Mm-hmm.
booth, and, you know, express your desire for the direction of the city.
Well, and I think on the more local the election, the more impact you have too.
Agreed.
Right, we can see our actions better on the local level than we can even on the county or the state or the national level.
Right, and then the local elections are by design, they're nonpartisan,
Mhm.
right? So
It's supposed to be.
Yeah, I won't go into that.
No, don't.
But the intent is you're getting community representation, right?
Mhm.
I've said this before, and I stand by it, is that these positions are representative positions. Outside of the mayor has somewhat of a leadership role within council, right?
Correct.
But every other representative, everybody else who's on the dais, anybody who's in place 1 through 6,
Mhm.
they're representing the entire city of Leander. It's not.
That's correct.
It's not
Districts or
they're not
anything.
districts or anything like that. It's at large.
Correct.
So in a way, you can kind of say everybody's running for mayor, but only certain people are running to have the title of mayor, right? Because you're representing the
Yeah,
whole city,
you are.
and that's the idea.
Right.
And the reason that I bring that up is that because a lot of times people don't understand that they look at it very much in my backyard,
Mhm.
right? Like, what's going on in my backyard, and they're concerned, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this.
Right.
But they're concerned about the pothole or the stop sign or
Mm-hmm.
you know, or the fact that their neighbor's yard isn't mowed or whatever the case might
Right,
be,
right.
right? And at the end of the day, from the dais and when you're on city council, you're dealing with issues that are that you still do deal with a little bit of that, right? But the issues that you're dealing with are more complex, they're more involved, and they're more directional because when you are done serving on council,
Mhm.
and you and I are not living in Leander, or we're move on to whatever else we do, the city's still going to be here, right?
Right.
The decisions that were made 5, 10, 15 years ago are a lot of what you on council today are
Absolutely.
trying to manage,
and
right?
a lot of the growth that you see now is stuff that was approved.
Right.
Yeah, a long
Right.
time ago.
So I again, and the reason I'm mentioning this specifically with you is because there's an issue that comes up almost as often as the elections.
Uh-huh.
And I've only been here a short while. Okay, I've only been here a short while. And in full transparency, I do have an opinion on this, but the Cap Metro issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I were to frame it, I would say it has been. I don't know how to say this, but it has been brought up at least 3 times that I know of in an election cycle.
Right.
Like, do we want to stay in,
Mhm.
basically, in or out, kind of,
Right.
clash. Should I stay or should I go?
Mhm.
Right? And each time, the population has said, we want to stay in, we want to stay in, we want to stay in. And again, there's, for those of you who are, maybe again, first time listeners, first time watchers, there are episodes of Lean and Leander where we go into the Cap Metro issue and we discuss it in a lot more detail than we're going to today. But the last election cycle came up again, city said, let's stay.
Right.
And then you were elected in that same cycle.
Mhm.
And part of your responsibilities, I don't know if this was an appointment, if it was by design, if you drew the short straw, I don't know what happened. But you ended up on the Cap Metro board, right?
Right. So how that worked, so the year I got elected on council, the mayor asked me if I would be the small cities representative on Cap Metro. So basically it's the non-Austin cities. And it just so happened that Leander was getting the board seat. So I accepted it. And then in the following year, so it was the elections for the following, which would have been, I don't know, 22, was when it was actually put on the ballot. Or we adopted to put it on the ballot. And
Oh,
and
that's
that's
right.
where it
That's
was.
right.
So
Your
I had
election
been-
was prior to
Yes.
it being on the ballot.
Correct.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
it was a big course of conversation. And so I spent between February and May of that year trying to do my car chats and talk to as many people who would ask me the question to make sure that when people went to the polls that they had all the tools in their tool belt, because there was so much misinformation at the time.
Sure.
And but we did. The majority said we want to stay in.
Right.
And so what I found my role as a city council member is the residents spoke, our voters spoke and said we want to stay in. So now my job is to make sure that I make the best out of that partnership.
Right.
And what I found when I became the board member on Cap Metro is that we hadn't done any of the work.
Right.
There were no conversations. There had been a lot of
supposition and not a lot. Yep.
but just not a lot of work.
Yep.
And so I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. And so I started meeting everybody and talking to everybody and figuring out where the issues were and what we needed to do and how could we take advantage, or advantage isn't the right word, but how could we make the most of our partnership with Cap Metro. Cap Metro is also going through some staffing changes. They changed CEOs. And so I don't think Cap Metro actually had the right leadership in the right places either. Now they've got a great executive team. And we've got a group, and I feel like I've made a lot of good connections and created some relationships, and with either Cap Metro staff and also fellow board members, that we can figure out what makes the most sense and how we can, speaking to Leander specifically, but how we can utilize the partnership to its fullest.
Right. So again, for the uninitiated, part of that is the way that the state legislature has designed mass transportation.
Right.
Because it's not just here, it's across the state.
Correct.
Is when a project like Cap Metro is, when you're talking about that, it was the same in Houston, it was, I forget what their metro is called, but it's the same thing. You have the member city, like in Austin, that's for Cap Metro. And then if they are to engage with any cities outside of their area, those cities opt in, right?
Right. So you either have to become a member, which is a vote, or some cities will do basically just contract with Cap Metro.
Right. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. And in the history of Leander decided to opt in.
Be a member.
Right?
Correct.
Be part of that.
Yes.
And so there was a decision made a number of years ago with the intent of the rail being a conduit to growth in
Correct.
Leander. You
Yes.
know, that was the idea, right?
Right.
So it was an investment in the future. And the dynamics of the conversation never really changed, but the conversation did, in my opinion. Because there's the issue of there's a 2% out of the tax rate, right? It's 8.5, right? And 2% is the city. So Leander gets back out of all the sales tax, and we're talking just sales tax, not property tax, not anything else, just sales tax.
Right.
We chose at that point to say, okay, we're going to give half of our sales tax, so 1% goes to Cap Metro. Right, and then Cap Metro uses that and supports us.
Well, that's the way the legislation
it's supposed to be written, right? That's how it is.
And come to find out, and I'm no expert here, but that each of the metro systems, it's a different part of the code. So everybody's a little different, even in Texas. And so, but there's no fluctuation or in the legislation to be able to scale the sales tax percentage based on the size of the city or anything like that.
It doesn't allow for that.
So as our city grows, right, that penny grows.
Right. So I think at the last time we took a look at this, and I say me at the podcast, I looked at it and we and Leander with our contribution equal 1% of the total budget for Cap Metro. And this was, a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
All right. That same math applies even as the money grows, right? It's still going to be just that it's a small contribution to the overall budgeting for Cap Metro.
Oh, sure.
Right? And so to us, it seems like maybe a lot. And I know there's some people who say, that's a lot of money, we can do other things with it, right? But I would also offer that, you're investing in the future of your kid, and you're going to put 1% away every year for their college education, right?
Right.
It's not that much at the end of the day.
Well, and I think the struggle is trying to balance that, right? Because it's not being willing to pay for the service, but it's how does it offset until we are grown out, until we are using where we can have pickup service around the city, where we can have the light rail is built so that we can go more places and all that sorts of things. I mean, so there's things that are down the road, but it's about figuring out what that middle piece looks like, right?
And to that point, and the reason I brought this up, and again, I don't necessarily shy away from the politics per se, but this one was really important because your work here has really been notable, and I want to make sure that the people who are going to the polls understand the work that's been done. And one of the factors, and you probably explain it much better than I will, but there was an opportunity to get some of that contribution, some of our tax money back into Leander, like invested back in Leander.
So what we've done is Cap Metro created an infrastructure fund, for lack of a better way to put it, because there are rules around what a transit-oriented company, Metro entity, can spend money on. Right? So they can't just willy-nilly do things. It has to be approved. So they created this $10 million fund, and then that money got divvied up between all of the suburban cities, which Leander's about 75% of those funds. So we got $7.4+ million to be able to use towards projects. We were able to fund the 183 study. We were able to fund the Old Town study. We were able to do some street improvements. It's not perfect, but it was $7 million or $7.5 million we didn't have before. The other piece of that is the Build Central Texas program. And that was an ILA that was between Cap Metro and the other suburban cities, but Leander had not been able to be a part of that because of the Metro wheel. And so we asked, and the board asked, that Cap Metro revisit that, and Leander was able to become a part of it. Plus, Cap Metro reduced the cost of service that was being allocated to Leander because of ridership. And with those changes, what's come back to the city thus far is about $3.5 million, but that number gets recalculated every year based on our cost of service and a few other things. So it was a very much a great place to start. I don't think those conversations are over. They're actually ongoing right now. And the work needs to continue. Cap Metro also has the ability to, they have grant writers and things like that, which is something that especially Mayor Christine has been really looking into, and we've tried to lean heavily into, because having grant writers or having those people out looking for grants is a great way to supplement our staff.
Right. Right.
And figure out a way for funding.
Right.
Right? And it helps us manage this gap.
So, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but in my opinion, and again, I do have an opinion on this,
Sure.
a collaborative approach has been far more productive than what we were doing prior to that. Would that be fair?
I mean, yeah. You just, I think it's like anything else in life. I mean, if you're not willing to sit down at the table and have a conversation to figure out where your, where the compromise is, and I'm, Cap Metro has not asked me or the city of Leander to give up anything, nor has it been the other way around. We both have a mutual, it's a mutual beneficial relationship, because when Leander is built out, we need mass transit. We've got a large landmass. What is it, like 45 square miles?
Something like that. Yeah,
Right?
39, 45, something like that.
We've got to be able to get people around the city.
Right. Right.
Efficiently. And this can be a part of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, and I think
It's painful right now.
It is, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And had in another universe, there's a multiverse somewhere where it worked exactly the way they planned it in the first place, right?
Right.
So there's another Leander somewhere in the universe that they did the rail, and then within 5 years, Central Texas blew up, and it was it was perfect. It was like Chicago.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah.
That's not the reality we live in,
Right.
but I do that a little tongue in cheek because, again, my opinion on this is very simple. It's like this is an investment in the future of the city, and you and I may not necessarily benefit from that, but the people who will benefit from that will look back at that and say, yeah, that was a pretty good decision. Like,
Yep.
that was a good thing that you did there. And for the city of Leander, in my opinion, to constantly be relitigating this in an election every 3 to 5 years is just, it's not conducive to that type of relationship.
Correct.
You don't build trust if every 5 years you don't know what's, well, are you in or you out kind of thing. So,
Right.
Again, that's my opinion, and I don't want to speak for you, but I just think it's one of the silly things that we do out here. If there had ever been a question as to whether we should stay in or come out, it would have been resolved in prior elections, right? And we keep bringing it back to say, do we want to do this? Do we want to do this? And every time the answer is yes. So at some point, it's like, accept the answer.
Right.
Right?
Well, there is that, and I got asked yesterday, are you gonna vote to put it on the ballot in 2027? And my answer is, I don't know. I don't know what the city's gonna look like. I don't know what the residents are gonna tell me. I don't know what the voters. I can't answer that question. And anybody that tells you they can, well, they're not representing the city and the voters, because you don't know what the voters want. That's 2.5 years, 3 years down the road.
Right.
So, my job right now, and hopefully through the next 3 years, is to figure out a way to best utilize and partner with Cap Metro. That's it. It's very easy.
Right. And again, we don't shy away from the politics, but to me, this is such a big part of what you've done on council. And again, it's my opinion that it's a good thing. So I want to highlight it. I think it's fair to bring it up because it's going to be a conversation point for your place and
Sure.
and in general for the city. And then
Right.
people are going to bring that up.
Right.
So you are the source. Like that.
Well, and
Here's
the reality
the person who's doing
is
it.
that there are 5 other cities in this suburban group. So, come election time, the Cap Metro board can decide they want Leander to stay and have that suburban city, or they can rotate it to a different city. So right now, Leander has a seat at the board table and a seat having conversations. If But that's up to the Cap Metro board as
Right.
to whether or not we go back into the rotation. I mean,
Well, hopefully there's enough of a partnership there and a leadership perspective, in my opinion, from Leander as well, because I think
I think there is.
I think that's what's happening.
Yes.
Is that like there was a void of leadership from both sides. I think you pointed
It
that out.
absolutely was from both sides.
And now that has been gap, and we bridged that gap. So now it's an opportunity to do the things that when you are in a collaborative environment and you are working to the betterment of the citizenry,
Right.
which, let's be honest, from a Leander perspective, that's what the modus operandi is, right?
Right.
That's what we're trying to do. From Cap Metro, it's a little bit different because there's a profitability piece and there's a few other things in there. But overall, the general mission of a mass transit organization is exactly that. It's mass transit. It's options for your population to remove vehicles from the freeways and to facilitate ease of use and ease of transit between the suburban areas and the central hub that is Austin. There's so many things that we can take advantage of there long term, in my opinion, that I'd certainly. Again, I applaud what you've done there, and the reason I'm featuring it so heavily here, and we talked about it beforehand, so it was okay with Becki. I didn't just bring this up.
It's important.
It's important. It's important. I think it's one of the topics that we can really, really speak to, and that you have a very unique perspective on. So we can talk about the other stuff too, like water. And,
We can talk about all of it, but my time with Cap Metro has been significant over the last. It's we have because not only do I sit on the board, but then they also have subcommittees of the board. So I sit on the finance, audit, and administration team too. So we meet on that once a month. Then we have board meetings once a month, and then there's all the work that happens in between.
So this kind of segues into that whole, like, are you sure that you want to do this? Because, man, it's a lot of time. I talked to Esme a little bit about this when we spoke a few weeks ago. And, one of the things that I point out in the process is that, it's a 3-year term, right? So you're making a 3-year commitment. You're volunteering your time for the next 3 years. Bi-monthly minimum, right? That's two council meetings a month, right?
Yes.
But what a lot of people don't have insight to is all the other stuff that occurs, right? Like you bring up the Cap Metro, and you're on that board, and then you're on a subcommittee there, and so 3 years, twice a month turns into 3 years, 4, 5 times.
Right. Well, and then you throw in the chamber.
Right. Then you throw in the chamber, and then you throw in all of the appearances, and then on top of that, there's your own personal volunteerism, which I know I've seen you at many events where I'm like, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, I volunteer here too. Like, don't you have enough to do?
Right.
So, it's a lot. It's a lot at the end of the day. And for my audience, that's one thing that I'd like to really surface and point out is like, this is not just the Thursday recorded meetings that are far too long. But
they've gotten a whole lot shorter though.
Statistically.
But we really wanted to make the meetings. There was a concerted effort to take the drama out of the meetings and to.
Oh, they are a lot more boring. I'll say that.
We just want to handle the work of the city and be done.
I think it's a good direction.
Yeah.
I won't lie that the level of drama, to use your term, is significantly less over the past.
Yeah, don't need popcorn anymore.
I stopped popping it. My subscription with Orville Redenbacher ran out, so I let it expire. But to the point there is like there's a lot of other stuff that you do, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you being so open and so willing to talk so much about the Cap Metro thing. So thank you so very much for that, because I think it's important. But I do want to talk about some other stuff that you do too,
absolutely.
right? So what else have you now? You have this desire to serve. You have this servant leadership kind of drive. You do the chamber stuff. Now you're on council. What are some lessons that you've taken away from that? Like, share with me a time where you were working on council and you were really excited about what happened in that particular exercise. Maybe it was the leadership forum. Maybe it was something else. Just share with us something that really kind of like got you excited.
I think it's feeling like things were moving in the right direction when I got on council, again, it's like it's drinking through a fire hose, right? Everything's trying to, sometimes it's terminology, sometimes it's just learning the people. I mean, there's just a million different things. But I didn't feel like there was a direction. Like, our city manager, no, I'm like, where's the strategic plan? What does the city manager do? How do we know to march in the same direction? We're getting on these complaints, and I know our staff, and I know they're good people. I don't understand what's happening. And so it was, there was some gnashing of teeth, but we ended up getting a movement on having goals and actions plans from the city manager, because the city manager runs everything.
Right.
We're the board of directors, and the city
Right.
manager is running the show, right?
It's the CEO of the city.
It's the CEO of the city, and so, but we were lacking that leadership. And so we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we were getting that in the right direction. And it took a while. It took a long while. It's taken several years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's right now, I mean, that's really top of mind for me, that I am thrilled to pieces that we should have true leadership coming in. And we've had it. Our interim city manager is a wonderful human being that has all the right qualities that you want in a city manager.
All right, I know you guys were trying to talk him into it for a long time.
We did. We knew we couldn't. We did it tongue in cheek, but one of the things that Isaac said was, I just want you to miss me when I'm gone.
Right.
And
well, you guys were missing him when he got here.
But we're definitely going to miss him when he's gone. But we're thrilled to pieces that Todd's going to be joining our team.
Right.
And that he understands from the interview process and all the conversations, because it was a very long interview process, because this city manager is going to take us to the end of our growth. I mean, we probably got 10 years, maybe 15, before we're built out.
Well, I mean, and that can accelerate.
Yeah,
because let's be honest, the economics behind that growth are pointing in a direction where, and this is one of those times where something that is I'll say it like a national issue affects us locally. Mm-hmm. If the Fed decides that they're going to loosen up the purse strings a little bit and kind of not either keep the rates the same or drop them a little bit, that'll supercharge what's going on right now.
Well, sure, and there's even some, projects and things that have been in motion, but when interest rates,
they
skyrocket, it slows them down, and
right.
they have to rethink either the size of the project and all the things. So there's been, some things that are probably postponed 4 or 5 years,
right,
because of either the pandemic,
right,
and then the interest rate environment after that, post-pandemic.
Right.
So, yeah, it could. 10 to 15 years is probably on the far end, but I think that's a fairly reasonable explanation, and I think the council that will be coming on board and our new city manager are going to be the group that are going to make the decisions that are going to see what happens over the next 10 to 15 years.
Right. Well, so the city's going from middle school to high school, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're kind of in that middle school period right now, and then in high school is where all the growth happens. Like, that's where you get your sea legs underneath you, and you decide you want to, be a big boy or a girl, whatever the case may be.
Well, and for Leander, over the last bit of time, we haven't been able to stop and go, or maybe we should have. There wasn't enough time to try to figure out and learn from your mistakes that you get when you're slow growth, right? It's no excuse,
right?
But it's just a matter. You just got to make decisions a little bit quicker.
Sure, and well, yes, that's part of what the reality is today. But again, like what we talked about a little bit earlier, is that you're dealing with decisions that were made when it was slow growth.
Right.
Right. So there was not necessarily the same, influencers, if you will, or the same impetus to make those types of decisions.
Oh, sure.
It just wasn't happening, right?
That was before we went into a 7-year drought.
Right.
That was before, and then we came out of it for, 10 minutes. And
Right.
then we're right back into a drought again.
Right.
So some of the watering decisions,
Yep.
some of all of those things that were made, and then they're hard decisions. So nobody wants to change it because it might make somebody mad.
Right. Right.
But our role on council is to do the best thing for the city as a whole. That means not everybody's going to be happy all the time.
Right.
But in the end, you hope that even the folks that may not have been happy with a particular decision have the ability to understand the reasoning behind it
Sure.
and to know that it really was the best call.
And to your point about the lack of drama, or the reduction of drama, let's say. It hasn't been completely eliminated, but
Correct.
the reduction of drama, it allows for someone like myself, and hopefully as a conduit to some of those conversations, other people who might listen to me and say, oh, this guy's actually bringing a couple good points. I don't know.
Right.
May not have any people like that. I don't know. But the idea is that one of the things that I found was missing, like when I got here, was clarity and communication, right?
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I do this.
Right.
Is because it was hard to find the information. You couldn't figure out what's going on, and then I would be on committees. I'd be talking to the people who were supposedly doing these things, and there were no answers, right? So I'm like, wait a second here.
Right.
What's actually going on? Like, what is actually going on? And some of that is a factor of the growth and the explosiveness of the growth. And again, like you said, you're drinking water from a fire hose, right? It's just a lot. And then the other part of that too is just when you go from, let's say 30,000 to 80,000, that's 50,000.
And you have to communicate differently.
You have to communicate
Right.
differently. You can't talk the same way.
Right.
Right?
And I think that's been definitely part of our growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the other things that I started talking about when we got on council was, we need to update our website. Somebody needs to be able to go,
That only took 6 years.
It took forever. And there's still content that's being added
Sure.
to it, right?
Sure.
But it's so
No,
much
the
better than
platform
what
is.
it was.
I talked to Christine about this.
Yeah.
I was like, it took 6 years,
Yeah.
but when you got, it's very good.
Yeah.
It's like much well. That's kind of my space in the tech world and whatnot. So when I saw what we did, like when I saw the new one launched, I'm like, okay, there's a few things here that still need to be tweaked,
Right. But it's better,
it's
and we're going to have a newsletter with it. You can sign up for a newsletter.
Yep. No, there's a lot of neat stuff there.
Our PIO team is doing an incredible job with the social media aspect of it. Even, and I'm sure Christine may have even mentioned it, when all of, when this major water repair was going on, we talked to, I don't know, she could quote it for you, but like 11 news outlets, all the social media, in your water notice or your water bill, and a few other the Warren Central Texas. If you didn't get that information, it was almost, it's like,
How did you avoid it?
Yeah, you had to have, because we put it in so many different places, and because we knew how crucial it was. The timing wasn't great, but the reality was this was the only time when you order the parts last April, they come in and you've got teams from around the country coming in with these highly specialized divers to be able to do this work, and it's 1,400 feet, I think, of pipe underwater. It's not an overnight thing, and those crews are working 24 hours a day. It's amazing, the work, and for a government project, it is on time and it is on budget.
Right, which are all very, very good points to draw out.
Yeah.
Because, again, and I don't necessarily count myself as someone who's not aware. I try to stay up on this kind of stuff, but I was still, people will come to me. I get asked while walking out and down, hey, what's going on with the water? And I'm just like, did you not receive the notice? This is what's happening.
Yeah.
Again, here I would say, not ideal, not the perfect time. It never would be.
It never would be.
It never would be. So you got to find the best.
Right.
You can only control the things that you can control, right?
Correct.
So that's what we could control. So we controlled it. I think the citizenry has done a good job in response.
Yes,
I
fabulous.
think the weather patterns have really helped with that, especially this week. If we
Yeah.
get the rain that they're talking about this week,
please.
then it takes away that onus, and I'll cop to this myself. I spend a lot of money in my yard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I invest in that. It's part of my house, and we're right at that point where we're like, I need to water my grass.
No, I know. I mean, I put in new flower beds in my front yard
Right.
last year. I didn't plant my vegetable garden this year.
Right.
You know,
right.
I'm hoping for a fall garden.
I'm holding off on mine as well. So
you know, but in the big scheme of things,
Sure.
it's a minor
Yeah,
sacrifice.
no big deal. No big deal. I mean, the grass is greening. It's coming
Yeah,
through, and
it
it's just, you know, if I were watering it every day and we had this,
It'd be
it'd be
greener,
green.
but
It'd be
yeah.
green, right?
But I bet you if it rains this weekend,
It'll
it'll
turn
drain right
green.
up.
Yeah, it'll turn green in a second.
Yeah.
I can promise you that. So I'm doing a rain dance.
Yeah.
You can join me if you like.
Yeah, I've been doing it. I promise.
All right. Well, I do like to, again, thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
All right. And I want to offer you the opportunity here, obviously, as part of this, to kind of let people know where they can find you. Like, what are your socials? What's your website? How do they find out more about Becki, and where can they find you to talk to you?
Sure. Probably the easiest two ways to reach me is through my City Council Facebook page, which is going to be Becki Ross, Leander City Council Place 6. And you can also find me on my campaign website, which is www.Becki, Becki, the number 4, Ross.com. And yeah, you can reach me by text or phone that way, and also can leave a comment on my Facebook page, and I'll reach out back to you that way.
Becki, thank you so much
Thank you. I appreciate
for
it.
doing this. I really, really appreciate this. And I hope that you have gotten something out of this. That's the intent. If you have any complaints about the content of the Vote In Leander series or Leander
Call me,
Leander,
Andrew.
call me. Don't call Becki. Call me, because I'm directly responsible for that. But I really do appreciate the candor and the forthrightness that we've answered these questions today here together. And I appreciate the insight into who you are and a little bit of how you think and what makes you tick. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much
Thanks
for
a
the
lot.
invitation.
Folks, that's it for this episode. I invite you to tune in and or listen. Again, subscribe on all the socials, and if you're more of the podcast kind of guy, you can find me on Apple Podcasts and several others. So wherever you listen, just subscribe so you get the content alerts. You understand that there's new stuff coming up. I do separate all the Vote In Leander stuff into its own series, so there's a couple of other ways you can find it, and of course there's always voteinleander.com. So feel free to go there to find information on voting, who's running, and some other things that I think are topical to us here in Leander. So that's it for this episode. Again, I appreciate Becki and her time here, and I look forward to having the conversation with now all of the candidates, because I've completed the incumbents, kind of. I may have to redo Nicole's because we lost video on that one, but regardless, we have the content, and I'll be distributing that over the next few weeks, and hopefully we can wrap up with all the candidates by the end of the month, so that you guys have the entire month of April to look at the videos, listen to the podcasts, and make some decisions on your own. So I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time. Bye.